Hello, friends, and welcome to the Professional Procrastinator. I'm your host, Rohila, and if you're tuning in, chances are you're ready to turn the page on your procrastination habits. Each episode is a step towards action. No guilt, just positive energy and better strategies. Let's jump in and make procrastination a thing of the past. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Professional Procrastinator Podcast. In today's episode, what I'm going to do is talk about how people think, and specifically how people think in terms of their circles, or rather what I'll talk about is their scopes. Now, how this topic came about was recently in a professional work environment. I was part of a book club, and the book that we're reading and reviewing was Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last. And what was interesting is I personally know every single person who was a part of that book club and was participating. I kept on hearing terms like doing things with intention or making a difference in your world. I also heard people say lead by example. Now, what was interesting about all this is I'm thinking about this, and I keep hearing these terms repeated as we are reading this book. And it got me thinking about how people think. Specifically, I think people think in terms of their circles or their scopes. So now, what is a scope? A scope is the extent of the area or subject matter that something deals with or to which it is relevant. So in other terms, a scope is just what you are aware of or what we are considering to be a part of your circle. So for example, one of your scopes could be family. Essentially, think about all your family. Or one could be the scope that you have of your friends, the scope you have of your coworkers. Essentially, the group that we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to be using that word scope instead of circle. So when we think so as I'm sitting here and I'm hearing people in this book club talk about doing things with intention and making a difference in your world and leading by example, the terms that I kept on hearing over and over again. What was interesting is people were talking about these terms, but only in their current scopes. And what I mean by that is, again, like I mentioned, I personally know everyone here. And what was interesting is there is a disconnect between what people are saying versus what is actually reflected in their results. One of the individuals is a manager. And what was interesting is this manager kept on saying doing things with intention and leading by example. And especially that part, the leading by example, because I know individuals who are part of that manager's team, and they all feel like this manager does the complete opposite. Essentially, this manager does things that no manager should do. It's not about empowerment. It's about disempowerment. It's about making it more about that manager than the team. And yet, everyone is actively saying the same things, trying to achieve the same results. But it's not truly a reflection of what they are achieving in their life. And that just completely got me thinking about our vision in terms of individuals. When people talk about being the best, they don't mean the best overall. They're talking about being the best in their circle of friends. One of the most painful quotes that I heard, and I'll paraphrase it, but essentially it says, everyone wants you to be successful, just not more successful than them. And a very, very painful lesson for me to learn early on was that is especially true in your circle of friends. Now, if you have a circle of friends who you grew up with, and you start making proactive changes in your life, you will hear them say things like, you aren't true to who you truly are? Or why are you changing? Or something's going on. You're hanging out with a different group of friends, or you're doing things differently than what I've come to know you as. And what does that do? That restricts us. It holds us back, which is one of the main reasons why, or how I came up with the concept of circle of influence. And perhaps I'll talk about circle of influence in an upcoming episode. But at different points of your life, when you reflect back, you start seeing that each growth spurt that you had came with a different circle of influence. It came from a different group of friends. Who I was 10 years ago is completely different than who I am now. But all the friends that I had 10 years ago, completely different than who I have in my life now. And that's what growth means. You don't do these things purposefully. I don't look around and say, okay, who can I weed out of my life? Let's do it. You've been around too long. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm just growing myself and attracting different people and detracting others. If all I talk about is growth and a growth mindset, and then you've got others who have a fixed mindset, they're going to leave out of my life just based off their own beliefs. I don't have to do anything. But at the same time, if I'm constantly talking about a growth mindset, I'm going to start attracting people who are also talking about a growth mindset. So when we think in terms of our circles or scopes, we define our scopes most of the time with work, family, friends, and groups that we belong to. And by groups that we belong to, I'm speaking about Rotary Club, for example, or sports or church, just different groups that we're a part of. So with our scopes, we do our best to be the best version of us in each of these scopes. We don't think globally, we think locally. We think in terms of our family, in terms of our groups of friends and family. When you're wanting to be the best version of who you want to be, who's going to be the first to see that? Your family. We will go out of our ways to be the best version of us, to support our family, to love our family, to show them that we are worthy of love and growth, and having them challenge us to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. But again, what this does is when we start thinking about scopes, it also limits us. And so all these terms that people were using in that book club, again, saying things like doing things with intention, that's a perfect example. Where are they truly doing things with intention? Of the 15 people or so that were a part of that book club, I know probably only a handful at most who do things with intention. They are proactive with their lives instead of reactive with their lives. They set goals that help them grow instead of goals that are within their self-existing comfort zone. You have others who will say things like lead by example, but they're doing the complete opposite. They're saying lead by example because it sounds good, but in terms of their own practice, they're not doing anything. And what happens is soon there's such a disconnect that anytime you're with a group that's about self-empowerment and growth and leadership, what happens is you start saying things that sound good to look good. You start posting quotes that sound good and look good, but you may not implement in your real life. What happens is we all know what we should do, but we don't always do those things. Perfect example is how many of you know that you need to eat healthy and get regular exercise? We all know that. We've heard it since we were kids. But how many of us do that? A very small percentage of the population will be active when it goes to getting exercise and be active when it comes to being healthy. So where's the disconnect then? If we all say that you should set goals and reach out of your comfort zone and grow, why do so few people do that? And that's where the disconnect comes from. And I started thinking about scopes and how we all live within our scope. It's difficult for us to see beyond the vision of our current scope. This causes us to limit our beliefs of the impact that we can make. Essentially, it causes us to think small. When we do our best to be the best version of ourselves within each scope, we're limiting the true potential that we have for growth. A perfect example of that is playing pool. If you play pool and you continue playing with others who you beat all the time, well, you're going to feel great about yourself because you're beating them. But you're not growing. You're not becoming a better player. When you play with others who beat you, well, now all of a sudden what's happening is you're learning from them. You're challenging yourself. You're growing. But if you don't do that, then you just ultimately limit yourself and limit your growth. And you're not going to be the best version of you that you can possibly be. Another perfect example of this is there was a millionaire who was a part of a mastermind and just wasn't achieving the results that they wanted. And they went to a coach that they had and said, whatever I do, I can't seem to make double-digit millions. I get close. I get $900,000, or sorry, I get to $9 million, but I just can't break that double digit. I just can't get to 10 million. And the coach said to this individual and said, well, who are you spending most of your time with? What's your mastermind group like? He's like, well, it's fantastic. They're all making millions. Everyone on there is a millionaire. And the coach looked at him and said, that's where you're going wrong. Don't spend your time with millionaires. Spend your time with billionaires. That's where you're going to pick up the philosophy, the tips and tricks and strategies that these billionaires do and implement those in your life. And that's the difference. When we think of our scope, what are we thinking about? We're thinking about our circle of friends for the most part, right? Well, if you're the most successful person in your circle of friends, where else do you look for inspiration? Who's going to challenge you? No one. Others are looking at you to challenge them to be better versions of themselves, but who's challenging you to be a better version of yourself? Who can you look up to? And if you don't have that person, then you're struggling. And I'm speaking from 100% experience here. In my circle of friends, I'm the only one that truly wants to grow beyond anything I can ever imagine. I'm the only one who started podcasts, written books, speaking events, workshops. I mean, you name it, I'm it. One of the biggest things that I've struggled with my entire life, especially the past few years when I've really, worked on creating my career in the world of personal development, is a mastermind. I've started several masterminds that have all failed. And the reason they failed was I was searching for the wrong people. I was looking at my friends who said that they wanted to grow versus finding people who wanted to grow. There's a change in the scope that needs to happen. If I continue spending time with my current circle of influence, with my friends, and allowing them to play the role in my life that they always have, I'm going to achieve the same results that I always have. But it's when you challenge yourself to think beyond your current scope that the true magic happens. Instead of playing it small, you need to think bigger, think globally. The real scope that each of us should have is a global scope. What are we doing to impact the world as a whole? JFK said it best. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Think beyond your current scope. Don't think in terms of how can I be the best version of me in terms of my family? How can I be the best person in my circle of friends? How can I be the best employee? By all of us thinking small like that, how much of an impact are we making in the world? And the thing is, it's very small. If you make it your goal to be the best employee on your team versus the best human on the face of the planet, your goals are going to be completely different. If all you're thinking is, how do I be the best version of, or how do I be the best employee at XYZ company? Guess what? You are limiting yourself from the impact that you can truly make. If you say to yourself, how can I be the most influential person in the entire world? Now, all of a sudden, that's where the magic happens. That's when you start thinking beyond what your current capabilities are. You have a new motivation that you don't have right now. When you think globally, your scope empowers you to go beyond your limitations. An example of this is if you don't like to do public speaking, right? This may hold you back in your current scope. But globally, you are forced to step up. That is truly the best version of yourself. Now, to truly wrap your head around everything that we've talked about in this episode is you need to ask yourself a couple of tough questions. One, am I truly being the best version of myself in all my current scopes? And two, what do I need to make a global impact? So to sum it up, we talked about how people tend to think in terms of their own circles or their scopes. Most people think, how can I be the best person on my team, rather than how can I be the best version, or how can I be the best person in the entire company? How can I be the best person in the entire world? We limit ourselves, we limit our growth, because when you think small, I want to be the best person on my team, guess who you're competing with? 4 or 5 people at the most? And congratulations, you achieved it. Now what? Versus, how can I be the best person in the world? Stop being the big fish in a little pond. You're not going to grow. Being a small fish in a giant pond will help you grow. It'll get you past your current reality. Think about what we do is we limit ourselves. We limit our vision. We think about our current reality, our current comfort zone, our current skills, our current resources. And instead, think globally. And the way you do that is by asking yourself 2 tough questions. 1, am I truly being the best version of myself in all my current scopes? And 2, what do I need to do to make a global impact? So with that, thank you, friends, for spending your time with me. Hopefully it wasn't just another form of procrastination. I'm Rohila, reminding you that sometimes later becomes never. So do it now. You deserve it.